Election Tuesday, otherwise known as the Hunger Games, as I'm labeling it, coming right up. We'll get into election odds. We'll talk potential consequences. And then we're of course going to get into gold, the juniors, the consolidation that's going on, the dollar strength that is now starting to show itself. We'll talk about whether or not that appears sustainable, along with a host of other topics and issues. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 92 of Bizarro World, otherwise known as the Hunger Games edition. Nick, how are you?
I'm good, Gerardo. I hope you're ready for riots until Christmas. And before we go on, I have to say, make sure you click the thumbs up button near the bottom of this video, and also subscribe to the Bizarro World channel because, well, it helps other people hear what little old me and Gerardo have to say. And with that, back to you, Gerardo, and the Hunger Games.
No, listen, let's get right into it. Hunger Games happens Tuesday. Let's throw out some crystal ball prognostications so we can make fools of ourselves. Who do you got, Mr. Hodge? Who do you have?
It's tougher than 2016, Gerardo. In 2016, the gut of guts sort of led me to Trump in the last minute, and this time it is more difficult. The polls are nearly unanimously in Biden's favor. The election odds are saying 65% in Biden's favor, but the fervor behind Trump is such that it makes me think that he can do it again. And of course, we know the Electoral College structure favors the Republican candidates in the current political climate. And so I know, and this is going to be a really long answer, sorry. I know that, Texas is being entertained as a toss-up state, and Ted Cruz called it a real race. And I know that Kamala is campaigning there today and hitting 3 different places, or at least this week. And I get that COVID cases are spiking. We just had the highest number of daily reported cases, over 90,000 this week. And so, gosh, you're doing like the gun to the head thing. I think Trump wins again, and we have riots until Christmas.
Okay. And let's a couple of points there. Not only is Trump's base, energized, putting it mildly, right? His core base, which he does a great job of mobilizing, but it appears Mother Nature is working on behalf of Joe Biden, right? I don't know if you saw the rally in Nebraska, and I thought for the skeptics amongst, the political class that do not like Trump and that believe he is a narcissist and believe that he just cares about himself, it was an interesting week to watch from afar. Did you see what happened in Nebraska with the rally and the freezing temperatures and people getting hypothermia?
I did. There was significant freezing rain across much of the Midwest this past week, yes.
And then did you see like a day or two later, it was the complete opposite. He had a rally in Tampa and it was 89 degrees and humid, and fire trucks had to be deployed to water people down because every 5 or 10 minutes people were needing medical attention.
The weather is karmic.
So I say all that to say that, look, we've had riots for the bulk of the year. If I'm looking at history and I'm studying it from a fourth turning perspective, I have to believe Trump wins. Because as you so eloquently put it a couple of episodes ago, a Biden win would stabilize the country. I do believe it would, unite more of the country, because Trump isn't interested in uniting. He's not even interested in continuing to try to beat back the latest surge in COVID cases. And it's not just cases, it's hospitalizations. And to me, that's the metric to chart, right? If you test more, yes, you get more cases, but the hospitalizations are just the people that feel bad enough to go expose themselves to an emergency room in a hospital. And they're not faking those. Nobody is faking a, a miserable existence to go spend the night at a hospital. That's not happening. And those are surging as well. And here we are days before the election, and Trump and his administration have just said that, no, we're no longer doing preventive policy. We're going to hope for a vaccine, and it'll be what it'll be. And of course, immediately Governor Kemp over in Georgia catches COVID from a Trump rally. The Pence staff, 5 or 6 of them caught it here this past week. It's just, again, it on a personal note, I don't see how you can look at that administration and say, they got it together. There's a coherent plan moving forward. I know initially when Biden was announced to be the candidate, everyone, including myself, looked at Biden and said, you've got to be kidding me. Like, can we get a better second option? Like, is this guy coherent? And you know what? To Mr. Biden's credit, he came on pretty strong, I thought, in the past month or so, as far as policy and specifics and the things that we've come to expect from presidential candidates. And so back to my prediction, just based on history and just based on where we are in this turning, all of the numbers look to favor Mr. Biden. History tells me Trump's going to win. And
that's, same for me.
Yeah. And history tells me that if he does win, it's not going to be decided on Tuesday, but we'll see. We'll know a Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. It'll be fun to talk about next week.
Listen, whoever wins presides over an American crisis, right? And it seems to me Trump would be better at presiding over an American crisis. There's a lot of other things layered in there. I don't think Democrats and Biden deserve to win. I don't think you get a true crystallization around a bottom and turning if you get a Biden presidency. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of, him dying before inauguration, which I'm sure you've been seeing these articles. Even the AP has been writing about it. What happens if Biden gets elected and passes away before inauguration and this and that? I think, like you say, to be on the side of history the way it needs to go is why I think that Mr. Trump wins.
And again, this isn't for those of you out there that are sensitive, which is not the bulk of you, because if you were, you wouldn't be listening to this. This isn't a political statement from Nick or myself. I personally am not a fan of Mr. Trump, and personally, I'm not a huge fan of Mr. Biden. If I had to sit down to have a beer, I'd probably much rather sit down with Mr. Biden. But I think they both have their faults, and I believe the citizenry deserves better candidates, to say the least. It's just a statement on where I think the election ends up because of where we are historically. And call it the Hunger Games, call it the Purge, call it, whatever you want to call it. We are in that part of the cycle where we need to see, again, as you put it several episodes ago, that final kind of, capitulation in our political system. And look, I think for those of you that are going to vote for the same guy that brought you, the some of the chaos that's going on, at least socially, a lot of it was inspired by his rhetoric, and focused on the negative instead of the positive, right? Then you have to own that, and vice versa for those of you voting for Mr. Biden. If he does win and he comes in and the economy shut down completely for the next month or two, then you're going to have to own that as well. And unfortunately, again, as a citizen who just voted, those were my two choices, really. There wasn't really a third choice. I know you might disagree with that, Nick. But to me, there wasn't. To me, you had to cast a vote for someone that had a shot at winning, and it felt a little dirty. It was similar to 2016. I came home, I showered, and I was like, please give me a better list of candidates in 2024, right?
I think you'll get that for sure. That's one thing I'm positive and upbeat about for sure. But yeah, it was a turd sandwich this year.
Yes, sir. Let's pivot back to gold and the consolidation in the juniors. It's been a pretty tough month if we're looking just at equity prices. It hasn't been tough as it relates to the progress that companies are making. Regulus is drilling. Chacana is starting to deliver really good numbers from the Soledad project. Nevada Sunrise got a drill turning at Coronado tonight, if I'm not mistaken, and has assays pending from Kinsley Mountain that we should see in the next week or two. So a lot of companies are doing a lot of good work, and they've been rewarded by seeing their market caps cut 30, 40, and in some cases 50%. Meanwhile, the gold price has pulled back a bit, but look, we're sitting here, we closed at 1878 today. And so the pullback has not been as pronounced as you would expect given the pullback in the juniors. Are we done with it?
Are we done with it?
Done with it.
I'm not sure. Gold fell to 1860s as it did in September, I believe it was, and held there pretty well. What's encouraged me is the earnings of the gold companies that I've seen come out so far. I think that does well to attract a group of investors that aren't already convinced of the gold narrative. They're now being convinced by as Rick Rule would say, the arithmetic of it, right? We've seen Kinross reinstate dividend. We've seen Agnico come out yesterday and increase dividend. We saw Newmont increase dividend. We saw Alamos increase dividend. So that's putting new eyes on the sector. And then I was reading an issue or the October issue of Junior Resource Monthly. And like you say, there's a lot of active companies as well. So there's a lot of deals out there. Some of the valuations are exceedingly cheap, especially for companies that have immediate catalysts ahead, and especially for some companies that even have resources in the ground and non-exploration catalysts ahead, but catalysts ahead nonetheless on other fronts, permitting fronts or what have you. And so I think it's probably a good time to start getting back into the sector, for new people to be getting into the sector, and to be buying some of those names that frankly were attractive 40 or 50% higher. It's a little early to get into names, but Magna Gold fell below $1, as did Revival Gold, for example. Two names that we talk about a lot, and two of some of the busier names out there.
Let's talk about companies whose share price has held in pretty well. I couldn't help but notice Almaden had a pretty good week, and it's had, frankly, a pretty good month. If you look at that chart, it hit a low, right around the dollar mark Canadian, and it closed today at $1.26. I think people and the market is starting to sense that we are close, finally, as we've been saying, to a permitting resolution down at the Ixtaca project. It also didn't hurt that the company has been very vocal about the fact that it is being aggressive again on the exploration front. And there is more to be discovered there, I believe. So it was nice to see Almaden hold up. The other one that's held up extremely well is one that, I had subscribers in, I think some 50 or 55% ago, and that's Probe Metals. It's held up very well. And, I believe it's a takeout candidate. It's got over 25 million Canadian in cash, rigs turning over 3 million gold ounces, headed to 4 and 5, huge camps, excellent properties, excellent management. So those two are interesting to me because they are both takeout candidates. And you mentioned the cash, the balance sheets and the cash position of the producers. And I think they are finally at a place where you're going to start seeing some aggressive M&A. And yeah, I think the better positioned juniors will benefit from that.
I have to agree with you. And then I see in my inbox today, comments from Sean Boyd, the head of Agnico, talking about how investors aren't interested in growth. They're interested in retaining that cash and passing it through to shareholders and focusing on margins and profitability and not growth. And so I'm interested to see how they approach it, because you and I both know that those reserves have to be replaced eventually, or else the profitability and the margins don't matter in a couple of years, right?
Yeah, and what are you going to do? Replace those reserves at $2,300 gold, $2,500 gold? I mean, as a CEO of a company whose job is to maximize return for shareholders, sure, it's nice that the shareholders want, the dividend, but it's not going to look too good in 2 or 3 years if you're buying, midway through the cycle when you could have bought with gold at 1875, 1890, 1900, 2000, pick a price. And valuations start finally coming back to reverting to the mean, right? I mean, we know that if we look at historical valuations, gold ounces in the ground, we're nowhere near, the highs that we saw back in 2011. And so I think we're headed back there. And I think it would behoove these producers with rich balance sheets to get out there and start replacing and replenishing those reserves at today's prices, because I don't think they last long. It's a long way of saying I think this is the bottom in that consolidation. And I think that, we're seeing the better names hold up, and some of the names that have really been beat up are starting to recover. So we'll see what that looks like. Another subject I want to touch on briefly is the dollar strength. We saw the dollar break above 94 after weakness, and it's happened exactly why we thought it would happen. Europe is in trouble. France, Germany just instituted nationally mandated lockdowns again. The ECB is doing all it knows how to do, talk about counterfeiting money and more stimulus. And I think the dollar's sniffing that out. And we're starting to see money come into the US dollar. I don't know if you had an opportunity, Nick, to see the footage of people leaving in France, people rushing to get out before the lockdown curfew was supposed to be imposed. Did you catch that at all?
I did not. That's very interesting.
The highways were absolutely bumper to bumper, and it was people rushing to get out of there. And I thought it was it does. I thought it was symbolic of what's going to happen to European capital. I think it's coming to the US, and I think it's going to boost the dollar up. And then I think we're going to have to see gold, Bitcoin, and you've heard me say this a million times, and the US dollar rise together. And I think gold's going to have a pretty good shot at proving that here in the next couple of months.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I was writing about it this week as well. It's been an inverse correlation with the stocks, right? I mean, the S&P has been absolutely brutalized, down 5% in the past week or so, and that's a large move in a short amount of time. And so, we'll see if it can catch a bid here post earnings season. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the election, and the size of the stimulus depends on who's elected. I also think that volatility is back in the mix, and so gold has held in there nice. But I'm with you. I want to see it. I want to see this melt up you speak of.
From a financial perspective, from a monetary and fiscal perspective, regardless of who wins, right? Back to the elections, Biden or Trump, we're gonna get stimulus, right? I know, again, I hate to beat a dead horse here, and we've said this week after week, but that's really why the market is throwing the tantrum that it's thrown, right? It had its worst week since March, I believe. The Dow did, and it wanted and was demanding stimulus before the election, and boo-hoo, you had to wait a week, and you might have to wait a month or two depending on how the election ends up. But I don't think that the fiscal policy is in doubt. They are going to print because there's very little that they can do. The Fed is actually out of things to buy and is begging for fiscal stimulus so that the monetary side can continue to be aggressive. And so, again, a pretty straightforward path to higher gold prices, in my opinion, and real estate in low tax areas like Washington State and Texas, right?
Well, and a nice window, right? If it's not going to get sewn up for a month or two here at the end of the year to sort of step back and reevaluate everything. I've seen a couple of, brokers send out emails about starting to tax loss harvest. And so a good time to start thinking about that and redeploying that cash into, the names we were speaking about in the beginning of the podcast, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can we talk about the gift that keeps on giving, Mr. Jerry Falwell Jr.? Did you see that headline recently amongst the very busy week?
No, but you're going to tell me, and I have a feeling by what's on the sheet, I know what's coming.
So he has filed a defamation lawsuit in Virginia against the university that he oversaw. So he filed it alleging that the private, Liberty University, the private evangelical Christian college, tarnished his reputation, quote unquote, in a series of public statements following his resignation over several sex scandals. The lawsuit goes on to very emphatically deny my words, not his, that he is no cuck. And so I don't know that there's anything in this lawsuit that would make me believe that it was filed for any other reason other than the fact that it did not sit well with him, that he now has this reputation, which again, no judgments at all for me. I am the last person to judge anyone on any consensual sexual activity, right? But he seems rather bothered by the insinuation. And so, yeah, I'll put a link up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just humorous to me that he thinks a lawsuit is going to change their reputation. I mean, the legal record is one thing, but the public diaspora and zeitgeist is something else.
Interesting to say the least. More to come, I'm sure. What else you got in your mind, Mr. Hodge? Do we want to talk about the political ad spend out there? Do we want to talk about, the intersection between, the business that we're in, one of them, the publishing business, and how that's affecting, plans and rollouts because of the political spend in this country, which is absolutely, it's the weekend before the election, right? Understandably so. It's absolutely off the charts, but it has a real world effect on even smaller businesses like ours, right?
Absolutely. And just in conversations I've had with people in the industry and articles I've been reading about advertising spend of late, it's the amount of money the political campaigns are spending this year, aided by, billionaires like Bloomberg who have thrown their money into the ring. Is just off the charts, and that's filtered down into TV and radio ad spend, yes, but also obviously, as our listeners are surely aware, online advertising, and so their media spend budgets are so vast and so great, and they don't have a product, right? They're trying to get you to vote, and that has to happen in the next couple of days, and so key metrics that would normally be analyzed, click-through rates and ROIs and conversions, et cetera, are sort of out their window, and they're literally just throwing money at the space to try to get views and clicks, so much so that I heard YouTube views were going for over $100 a piece. And so they're pricing out not only industries like ours, but I've been reading about this affecting, giant retailers as well. I mean, the Walmarts, Targets, Amazons of the world, et cetera. And so I just thought it was interesting how expensive this dog and pony show truly is, right? And of course, you could go anywhere you want with that discussion about, corporate money in there and Supreme Court decisions, et cetera. But a whole lot of money is being spent to buy your attention this week and early next.
When you say that there's organizations and groups paying $100 per click, is that did I get that right?
Yeah, per view on YouTube, right? To watch a YouTube video where you're not guaranteed to have any sort of action after that. You don't know if they're going to click or convert or follow up. That's just to get them to watch the video, right?
So they're paying $100 not to sell something, just to get someone to watch the video of what they may be selling.
Incredible, right?
Can Jerry Falwell Jr. will appreciate this. Can I watch? Maybe that's his calling. He should be the person that screens these things. He can make $100 a pop and get his kicks off.
And so if
I may have found a new career for Mr. Falwell Jr.
Just cluck here.
Oh man! All right,
But if you feel like you can't get away from political ads, if you feel like they're inundating your inbox and the margins of every website you're on, you're 100% correct.
Absolutely. Anything that you're looking forward to this week from the markets, Nick? I know we talked Chicana. I know we talked, Nevada Sunrise Gold. We often follow a lot of the same companies because we help finance a lot of the same companies, but we also have companies that you dabble in, not just resource related companies, but you're a master of all crafts there, and you have a great network across many sectors. Are there companies outside of the resource space that would behoove people to dig into and get familiar with? I know you mentioned a company about a month or so ago, a lithium company, which is a resource company, but Critical Elements, and it's done extremely well. You have several other companies that I know have done extremely well outside of the resource space. Any tidbits or tips or ideas for people? It's a free podcast, Nick. We have to give them their money's worth.
Yeah, that's it. And if you want me to talk about something that happened this week that actually hasn't been that great of an investment, and well, not even not great, it hasn't been a good investment, but nonetheless, that I'm a long-term hand most times, and you as well know that large winners can come from shares that are down by half or more before they go up. And so this is a company in the beverage space I've been involved in for a long time that has gone through multiple management changes and rebrandings and strategies, but has seemingly got itself into a place now where it has shed a lot of costs because of a branding agreement it had with a country singer named John Rich and a brand of his called Redneck Riviera, where they were making and marketing his whiskey and incurring all of the marketing costs, which wasn't so great for the bottom line, despite getting them some national recognition. And so they've got some professional operators in there now from the national beverage space, and they just shed that brand this week, which is why they come to mind when you ask me that question. They sold the Redneck Riviera whiskey to John Rich, who created a couple new corporate entities to buy it. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, they've got two very positive things going for them that interest me. One, they've acquired a tequila company called Azuñia that has very deep-pocketed owners that can help avoid dilutive equity issuance going forward. And it's an exciting brand in itself. But more importantly, the most profitable sector and what will drive them to profitability very quickly is their canning operations, which are high margin and which they can expand very quickly with a little bit of capex investment into expanding. They already have a stationary bottling plant in Portland, and they own a mobile canning station. They're looking to buy a couple more, and so it's the stock is very cheap. We financed this thing, $3.50, for example, and it's been dead money, trading flat down around $1, but perked up very quickly to $1.30 on this news. Of course, it's been an incredibly volatile week in the stock market, and nothing was immune to selling. So that announcement probably didn't even get the results it should have gotten. But nonetheless, that ship seems to now be righted with that announcement, and we can get to some profitability here shortly with Eastside. And then that's when the torque and the multiples of the beverage space start kicking in, which is why I got involved in this thing to begin with.
I like it. There you go, everybody. If you didn't get your money's worth out of that, quit listening. You're not going to get your money's worth. Mr. Hodge, it's going to be a hectic week coming up. And so, I want to make sure that we do a very thorough episode next week, recapping all of it, which is a long-winded way of saying that I think on my end of it, we should cut this one short here, right at the half-hour mark. Some good companies to look into, things to look forward to. We think the consolidation's over. I think the consolidation's over. In the better names, I think the dollar's going to get stronger, and we'll see how our crystal ball prognostications play out as it relates to Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden. Anything else?
Sets the stage. I think that sets the stage well. I think that gold is trickling more and more into the mainstream, not only for the earnings reasons I said earlier, but because it has been at record prices. There was a big article in the BBC this week that I wrote about a little bit, but that I was seeing shared around in other newsletters I follow that aren't stock market or resource related. And so I just think that the gold story is separate from the need to replenish reserves, separate from the exciting drilling companies that we're involved in, separate from the rising dividends. I think there's other components of the bull market that are going to start to take shape that, really start to drive things as far as fear and greed and narrative, right? And so, no, I think that's good.
Agreed. And look, people, frankly, I personally, as a speculator in the space that has a significant amount of my net worth, allocated to the space, I don't want to see everything work at the same time because it doesn't allow me to rotate out of, some of the winners and into some of the laggards that I can identify early on as the next group of winners. And so I think we nobody likes to see a stock pull back 30 or 40%. But again, if you're doing this the right way, you're using those pullbacks to enhance positions and yeah, I'll leave that there. I'll also leave you with some breaking news from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Mr. Trump's quote on what will happen if Biden wins on Tuesday. He says, quote, "There will be no heating in the winter, no air conditioning in the summer, and no electricity."
The voice is actually pretty good. You do well.
Winter is coming, y'all. The Hunger Games coming on Tuesday. I'm Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This was a Hunger Games edition of Bizarro World, episode 92. Have a great week, everyone. Stay safe. Go vote if you haven't, and wash your hands.
And gather some wood.
No electricity for anyone.